About one half of our episodes are behind a paywall at patreon.com/unregistered. When you become a patron at any level, you have access to those shows as well as my weekly live meeting with patrons called Unregistered Live. Also, if you would like to take courses with me and other instructors, go to unregisteredacademy.com, where we have courses on everything from the history of the CIA to how to grow weed. Finally, if you would like to come join us at the Chicago Unregistered event in October with Curtis Yarvin, Ben Burgess, and Batya Ungar Sargon, go to unregisteredacademy.com to enroll. I hope to see you soon. This is the Unregistered podcast, and I'm Thaddeus Russell. This is a show about ideas, people, and behaviors that are considered inappropriate, out of bounds, or beyond the pale. The things you're not supposed to talk about if you're a school teacher, a college professor, a businessman, a politician, a parent, a neighbor, or even a podcast host. These are the things you're not supposed to say or even think if you're a good liberal, a good conservative, or a good citizen. Each week, I'll interview a person who has something bad to say. They might be a journalist or a professor. They might be a porn star or a drug dealer. They might just be an ordinary person with an ordinary job who doesn't care about the rules of polite society. I'm not interested in breaking the rules just to be a troublemaker. I'm interested in people who break the rules of conventional thought and to expand the scope of what is possible to say in our society. I'm interested in people who make me think. At the end of 2018, I was invited to speak at a conference of anarchists in Acapulco, Mexico. A few months later, I had the wildest and scariest experience of my life. And I had that experience with the guests in this week's episode. This is my interview with Lily Forester, Jason Henza, and Todd Schramke. I am joined from Morelia, Mexico, Nashville, Tennessee, and Puerto Vallarta, Mexico, by Lily Forester, respectively, Todd Schramke, and Jason Henza. People know Jason and Lily from the show The Anarchists on HBO, and Todd is the maker of that show, which he's been working on, or has worked on, for the last 6 years. And I, of course, am in the show, and I'm very involved in this story. Let's talk about the first controversial point here, which is what many people who are political who have seen the show are talking about on Twitter, at least, which is that apparently this show, The Anarchists, is not actually about the anarchists. It's not about anarchism, Todd Schramke. This is about people who pretend to be anarchists who are not real anarchists because real anarchists don't like capitalism. So I need you to answer for this.
Yeah, I don't really care that much. Yeah, I mean, the people call themselves anarchists. It's an ideology. It's an abstraction, and it's existed for hundreds of years. And people with a lot of different viewpoints have called themselves that. So, yeah, and it's about the people. The show isn't really about an ideology. The ideology is just the background to the story that unfolded down in Acapulco. So, I mean, and I feel for them, like if you're really deep into a certain anarchist, ideology, and you feel like this doesn't fit you, then yeah, I understand being a little bit bothered, but it seems kind of just like a form of hipsterdom than an actual valid grievance.
I was an anarchist before it was famous.
That's right. Yeah, I mean, no one owns the damn term. My goodness. Right? I mean, no one owns it. People act like they're proprietary over it. Like, no, you're not allowed to use that term if you're not like me. But I mean, just so people can understand what we're talking about here. I mean, I'm sure a lot of the audience knows what I'm saying here, but people who have identified as anarchists over the last few hundred years, more often than not, have opposed capitalism and free markets and all that stuff. But there has been a significant but relatively small wing of anti-statist anarchism that embraced free markets and at least portions of capitalism. And that's what Acapulco was a part of. It's Jeff Berwick, who is the organizer of it, the leader of it. He's that type. He's an anarcho-capitalist. He believes in no state and free markets. So I think it's just silly. I think it's a lot of people who identify as anarchists on the left who are just mad. They're haters, right? They're just mad that you guys are now famous, that Lily and Jason are now famous and Jeff Berwick is famous and they're not. Don't you think? Is that what's going on?
I mean, if you ask me, I'm not necessarily sure that they're jealous. I see a lot of them being like, HBO is connected to the government and you're just giving all your information away to the Fed boys and stuff like that. Like, it's almost like it's more virtuous to not be known at all.
Yeah.
I mean, if I'm being honest, I never expected it to end up on HBO.
I thought for sure you'd end up on HBO, actually.
Not me.
Given your life, which we're going to talk about, arguably the most dramatic life of anyone I've known in my life. Let's talk about the history of this show. And so what I want to do is ask Todd what he was doing. 6 years, first of all. What a long time to be working on this. Watching that footage over and over again, thinking about it constantly. So what were you doing 6 years ago that led you to undertake this project, documentary film about Acapulco of all things? What's going on in your life?
I've been making films and documentaries since I was a child. I started when I was 12 years old, and it's just been a passion and a dream of mine to be making a living doing this. And I was living in Alameda, California, just outside of Oakland in 2016. I was 26 years old, and I'm also a musician, so I was kind of just floating between playing in a band at the time and doing some non-profit work with the video stuff and some low-budget commercial work. And I also had this background interest in cryptocurrency, and that came from an earlier chapter in my life when I was in college. And I myself did a deep dive into anarchism and an even deeper dive into this world of voluntarism and anarcho-capitalism, and knew a lot about it. And I knew several people, a whole bunch of people who were still following that world. And a couple of them were going down to Mexico more and more frequently and talking about Acapulco and the community that was forming there. And then I explained in episode 1 of the show how I came across this video by Juan Galt, who was trying to introduce these personalities who had, created this vision of a dream community where they could use each other's resources to escape the powers of central banking and nation states down in Acapulco. And cryptocurrency also was just hitting the mainstream at the time, and there was the first wave of Bitcoin documentaries that were coming out, and I didn't think they did a great job at telling the ideological origins of crypto. So I kind of just had this idea of doing maybe a digital short about this community that would, I don't know, maybe I would send it to a magazine or something. And yeah, it was kind of on an impulse and on a whim. It was actually after being harassed by the Alameda police one night after I was feeling kind of broken and disheartened because my apartment had been sold to a new owner and I was possibly facing a rent hike that I couldn't afford. So I was out at nighttime just sitting on a park bench, and the police threatened to arrest me. So I was partially myself thinking like, what can I do to get out of this situation? And I thought of this community that was down in Acapulco, and I wasn't sure that I was going to join the community, but it just got my mind thinking about the idea of just getting out of the United States and doing something different. So it was kind of this big conglomeration of events going on in my life, and I was looking for my next documentary project. So yeah, that night just booked a plane ticket and went down a couple months later and met these people. And I was surprised to meet a couple people who weren't in Juan's documentary, who everyone kept talking about down in the community. And, one of them is here with us. And yeah, it just kept growing and growing from there into this massive, massive machine that it became.
Indeed. It has become quite a story, in fact. So you have a bit of a deeper, I think, history with anarchism, though, in particular with one very important, influential, famous figure within anarcho-capitalism. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, I mean, the whole thing started for me like a lot of people, and it's not even just the anarcho-capitalism. I think a lot of people, even on the left, entered this into a similar way where they became politically active. In my case, I was 18 years old and was drawn in toward Ron Paul because at the time, libertarian wasn't really a mainstream ideology. Most people had no idea what that word even meant in the general public. And Ron Paul, to me, I was a punk kid, a punk teenager, and he was anti-war, pro-drug legalization, and he just kind of seemed like the most punk rock candidate at the time. And I got behind his campaign and just saw how terribly it did. It kind of ruined my faith in the democratic process. And I just started looking toward other options that were related to it. And I typed in libertarian podcasts. This was 2009. And there weren't that many podcasts out there at the time. And the one that came up was Free Domain Radio, which was Stefan Molyneux's podcast. And the first episode I listened to was a very even keel discussion of alternatives to the services that the state provides. And it kind of just opened my mind up. I was like, oh, this is a fun conversation. Like, we can talk about different ways we can structure society that are based on voluntary interactions. This seems like a universally interesting topic. And a big part of that too became also about how, this is just abstract and this is just, casual conversation, but how are we actually going to get there when the world is built the way it is? So, the main topic around that, I mean, a lot of people in that community were talking about that only as a party conversation, but the serious conversation that was going was around peaceful parenting and the idea that violence in society is the product of childhood trauma, and the actual way to get a stateless society is through multi-generational peaceful parenting. And that was really all it was. And most of it was just about like therapy, like going through CBT and learning about yourself in order to become a more peaceful person. And it was fine, but it got kind of, boring pretty quickly. And then there, was this strange cult that formed around Molyneux. And that kind of weirded me out. And I distanced myself from that, but took what I liked about psychology and CBT and continued to implement that into my life. And moved on with my, my journey and moved out west. I'm from New Jersey originally, and kind of just distanced myself from that. And then, it sucks too. That's like, I've been a little bit dragged around on Twitter because I mentioned that I had been following and influenced by Molyneux back then, because a few years later he took a strange career turn, and now I'm a little bit embarrassed that I'm associated with him. But that was how I found it, and that was also how a lot of the people in the community, that was how I met Juan Galt, was at Stefan Molyneux's house in 2010 at a barbecue. And we had just stayed connected on Facebook. And that's also how the Freemans got into anarcho-capitalism, was through Molyneux and a bunch of people down there, especially in the early days.
You seem to be attracted to libertarian cults.
Yeah. Well, kind of, part of it was in telling the story, it was multifaceted. I had this idea of telling a cryptocurrency story, but I also was interested because I had gone through my own journey with this cultish community in my early 20s. And I thought it would be interesting to follow some other people who were starting another community based around a similar ideology, and just seeing how strange and peculiar that unfolded with the Molyneux community. I kind of suspected that something similar might happen down in Acapulco, which is kind of, what happens when you have an open community that's based around an abstract ideology and anyone can show up. Things are going to get interesting.
Yeah, now you asked me to become a part of the project, I think mostly because you wanted sort of, I guess, my political expertise, my intellectual expertise. I mean, because when we originally talked back then, 3.5 years ago, you said that the project was really for you an attempt to answer a question you had, right, about libertarianism and anarchism and the state, which was, does this work? Does it make sense? Is it a good thing for me? Is that right? I mean, that this project was really an intellectual exercise for you from the beginning.
Well, one thing I will say is that I think the main reason I reached out to you is because I saw you were speaking at Anarchapulco, and I was a fan of your book, and I kind of just wanted to connect with you. Renegade History was pretty influential for me when I had first moved to California when I was 23 years old. I read that book, and it actually helped broaden my worldview and kind of get me out of my libertarian mindset, and it made me interested in queer culture and actually more left ideology. So I just thought it was interesting that you were going to be speaking there, and I was trying to just connect with you. But yeah, and I don't remember saying that, but there probably was some truth to that, and I think that kind of is in line with what I'm saying now, and that I was just fascinated by this idea of an ideology as the answer to the world's problems, and that there can be some small group of intellectuals who have written the right books and just conjured up the right thoughts that will solve all of our world's problems. And just I wanted to tell a story of people who were diving into that and trying to see the world through that lens, and also explore the personal issues that people were facing that led them to that solution.
Yeah. Wow. I guess I didn't know that story about Renegade History. Maybe you told me that a while ago, but that's awesome. Thank you for that. But the question though, didn't you have you were sort of asking whether this politics makes sense for you in part, weren't you? I mean, you do it in the film, you do it in the series. You talk about that, about how it's your journey essentially to explore this political ideology essentially that you were fascinated by, but you have questions about it because you see it sort of falling apart in front of your eyes.
Yeah, I mean, from a filmmaking perspective, I think that's just the best way to approach a documentary, though, is to just go in with a totally open mind and let the subjects try to convince you, and let them give their, best arguments and truly explain what is bringing them in. So that is my template for telling a story, which is to just go in with an open mind and let it play out. Because I mean, had the story ended with this community growing and thriving and finding ways to subvert the state, that's what, that's the story we would have told. But that's just not what happened. And but yeah, I mean, that is true. Yeah, I was totally open to exploring all of this, but it wasn't at that point from a hopeful or ideological perspective. It was really just I wanted to tell the story of this community.
When you and Kim sent me an email, I think just introducing yourself and asking to interview me at Acapulco, I think you sent me a clip, right? Or a reel that had Lily and John in it. And I was immediately taken. I had to interview them. I had to have them on my show because they are the closest things to the renegades of my book that I've ever known in person. I mean, getting busted on cannabis charges and fleeing the law and then escaping the United States into Mexico, and then, living off the grid on cryptocurrency on top of a hill in Acapulco and risking their lives. I mean, had to be told. So that was a life-changing thing, that email sending me their story. But I guess I want to now talk to these two, but I want to eventually get back to this question of where you are with libertarianism and anarchism. I mean, can you actually say that right now? Now, 2022, the series has been aired. You've gone all through it. Are you still a libertarian, Todd Schramke?
Short answer, no. But long answer is I mean, it depends what you mean by that, because a lot of people who talk about anarchism, they use it as a synonym basically for being a good person, which is don't be violent, don't steal from other people, just be a decent person. So if that is the definition you are using, then sure, but it's an incredibly loaded word that most people don't perceive in that way. So I don't understand the point in trying to hold on to that word when it has such a negative connotation for most people, when you can just use a much more simple word, which is good. So I try to be good. If that is the same to you as anarchist, then sure, call me an anarchist. I don't, I'm not offended by it.
All any anarchists of any stripe would want to know right now is, are you a statist, sir?
Yeah. No, maybe.
Oh,
I don't know. It depends what you mean. I like there's a lot of interesting theoretical conversations one could have about how do you deal with violence, and I think this show definitely through some of the events that unfolded bring up the problems of what do you do without a government and without a state.
Yeah.
And even if you do replace it with some other system, how is that not a government? How is that not a state? If you have a private security force, even if it is only, protecting your individual household, that's still in some ways a form of government over your house.
Mhm.
So, I mean, I don't know. That's my answer is I don't know. Maybe I'm a statist.
Okay, fair enough. All right, we'll get back to this.
Yeah.
So now, so I saw this clip of Lily and John, was completely transfixed. I didn't know about Jason Henza. I guess I knew that I heard his name. I knew that he had been shot. He was in the house with Lily when it happened. But I went to Acapulco in February of 2019. I think was it 2 weeks after the murder? I think it was 2 weeks, right?
2 weeks, yeah.
Yeah.
2 weeks.
And I met all of you downtown Acapulco, and there's Jason Henza, who had one bullet in you, right? You still had one bullet in you and three bullet holes.
Yes. Yeah, that is right. I had one go through my knee, one off my wrist, and then one still on my chest in the moment.
What is it like being shot?
It just feels hot. Like you and then your body stops working in the area where you were shot. Nothing more. There's no pain really.
You were limping though, then.
Well, my leg wasn't working.
Yeah. And have you fixed all that? Are you okay now?
Yeah. I have 100% mobility in my right arm, which is the bulk of the issue. I had full movement and full range in my leg in about 20 days. I was able to run on the leg 10 days after. And yeah, the bullet went clean through my knee and didn't hit anything in there and just popped out the other side. The right arm, on the other hand, the bullet sits in a nerve cluster, and I lost feeling in my right arm completely, and I did not have full control of it for 6 months. I still today, these two fingers down here are numb. I can't throw a baseball very well. It always launches out to my right side.
Okay. What were you doing 6 years ago?
I was crusading for libertarianism. I was one of the co-founders of the Lake County Libertarian Party of Illinois. And my idea for that was to create a voting block and actually have the politicians come to us and to garner our votes instead of running our own candidates, because we had no choice. We were going to lose no matter what going that way. So I focused a lot of my time on reviewing candidates from the left and the right and who chose more liberty that would have made us all freer in the area that I lived in.
And how did you get to Acapulco?
I cashed in 1,000 Ethereum to get to Acapulco. Yeah. So I cashed in about $40, and that paid for the entire trip and all the rents around my house. And looking back, you're just like, wow. But on the other hand, well, what good is a currency if you can't use it? So.
Yeah. So I've heard. So that's the how you got to Acapulco. What's the why? Why did you go there?
I saw Juan Galt's Settlers and Erica Harris down there, the Freemans, and then I found Lily Forester and John online, and their story was absolutely fascinating. I also have friends, a couple other friends who probably would rather me not name them, that live in Acapulco. They've turned into kind of hermits these days, but they were really inspiring for me. And I worked with them in the radio industry when I was working for Liberty Express Radio. So I had a chance to constantly, I was kind of like a radio monkey. So I was just cutting up their file and just popping it in so that way it would fit the airwave. And
you moved there. You were basically living there though, weren't you?
In Acapulco?
Yeah.
Yes, yes. I was not going to live there, but me and my ex broke up, and it provided a really good opportunity to actually follow my dreams. And I was able to cut off all the things that were weighing me down and actually be myself. And it was really great.
And you were living in poverty, right?
Yeah. I earned about $600 a month. I had gotten fired about 2 months. Actually, not fired, but they ended my job about 2 months before I went to Acapulco. So I was out of work for about 2 months, and then once my old boss heard that my ex-wife left me, she asked me if I could do some work. I said yeah, and then she was able to find me about $600 a month worth of work, and I was able to survive in Acapulco on $600 a month.
Wow. And then you ended up in the house with Lily and John on that day when he was murdered. So how did you get there? I have never actually heard this story, I don't think. How did you guys meet and get together and become friends and all that?
Lily was talking to me online through a different kind of chat messaging. I'm not really sure if we were talking through Fascist Book Messenger or if we were talking through Wire or what we were really talking through. But they had agreed to meet me at Verde Vegan, where I had some cryptocurrency, and I heard that they accepted cryptocurrency. So I went and spent some dash over at Verde Vegan, and they were 3 hours late. And my ex was just absolutely pissed at me. She was like just fuming at the fact that I was waiting for people for so long, and that we should just be doing our own thing and get out of there. But they finally showed up, and we jumped in the back of that truck, and John ripped around streets, and Lily took photographs of for rent signs around the area. And eventually we found a place for us to stay in Acapulco. And that's kind of like how we met.
And weren't you sort of staying at the house too?
Yes. After me and my ex broke up, I stayed at Lily and John's house for a good month and a half, I think.
Right.
Because we were still looking for a place for me to live up there, and we were struggling to find something that was within my price range. But there were places; it just took a while to find it.
And what did you think of the other anarchists when you got there, besides John and Lily?
I love them. I thought they were great. I thought they were wonderful. I thought a couple were really neurotic and interesting. I didn't quite understand their personalities, and I always tried to give them the benefit of the doubt. But yeah, they were all relatively great. I mean, I really found a real good kinship with Paul. I identified with him a lot. He was just so friendly, and he would offer the shirt off his back the second he met you, and it was like really easy to like him. But you start to realize, like, after a while, he was trying to make up for something that was gonna, go wrong down the road, or he was kind of broken.
Do you think Paul was behind the murder?
Yeah, I do. I absolutely do. That's the only evidence I have. I have a whole bunch of hearsay on who else was behind the murder. But I mean, Paul threatened us for 6 months. I mean, what else can you say? It's like, obviously he has to be behind the murder, because you can't just blame the cartel when you don't have any evidence. You just have people saying that the cartel said things, and going back and realizing the people that are talking about the cartel saying things, that they aren't 100% accurate all the time. I don't want to call them liars, but they aren't 100% accurate when they say things.
So he sent me a message, a DM on Facebook. Paul did. I guess it was in February that year, 2019, right after the murder. And the first message he sent to me before he went completely crazy and started sending me naked pictures of himself was, he said, I have evidence that Jason Henza murdered John.
Did he show you evidence?
No.
No, yeah. I mean, we hear a lot of I have evidence, but people rarely show evidence. What they do is in our community, a lot of times people's minds, actually in people in general, but people's minds will take an assumption and call it evidence. And then they'll rely on that assumption moving forward and accusing people of things that they probably didn't even do.
Well, Paul, if you've watched the show, you will know, was a deeply disturbed individual. So, I mean, he was saying a lot of stuff. He was threatening to kill me too during that time. He was saying a lot of stuff about a lot of people. So tell me about, what were you doing the morning of February 1st? What was happening? You were at the house?
Well, the morning, I was excited about getting my motorcycle fixed. So I posted online that we're going to go get my motorcycle fixed and take it down to Central and blah, blah, blah. And put that out there into the universe. And I drove up to John's house, and we put my motorcycle in the back of his truck, and we took it down to the Central Market. And we dropped my motorcycle off at the mechanic, and then we went in to go buy meat. And then John and Lily kept asking me for more money as they were buying meat, because they kept buying more and more meat. They just didn't have any money at the time. So they needed some money to buy meat. So I gave them money. And they told me they'd just make me a nice dinner. And I figured I owed them for helping me get my motorcycle down to the mechanics. And that's what we did the morning of. We got up really early too. I think it was about 8, if I remember. Maybe it was 9, but it was really early for John and Lily. They never got up at that early. It was so rare to get up that early for them.
Mm-hmm. And
well, for John, okay, I was up at real early taking care of the birds, to be clear, at like sunrise.
Correct the record. Good job, Lil. Good job, Lil. So where were you sitting when the people came into the house?
I was sitting at the dinner table, just as normal. I had just finished my entire plate. John had eaten halfway through it. And Lily, we hear this barking. Lily runs out front and darts, and she says, "There are people throwing rocks at the house, John." And John jumps up and he starts running outside. Then he darts back into the bedroom and then runs back outside. So I dart out after him, and I'm probably about 15 feet behind him. And I think Lily was about 15 feet behind me. And we just darted outside to see what was up. And I saw 6 men down there standing at the edge of the driveway. They all started to back up as John pulled forward and stepped outside the gate. And then next thing you know, a whole bunch of fireworks were going off. I saw John pop up and collapse. And then I started getting hit everywhere during that time. It hit me in the legs, it hit me in the arms, the chest, all over my body. And I realized it was the driveway breaking up in front of me from the bullets hitting. And then one bounced off my wrist, and I said, "Oh shit, they're shooting at me." And I drove under the vehicle, and one went through my knee, and I felt hotness through my knee. And I looked down and said, "Oh, there's a bullet going through my knee." So I crawled out underneath the vehicle and rolled out the other side, and one bullet went through the truck's bed into my chest, and my arm went dead. And at that point, I knew I was like really injured, and I cried out to get them to stop, because let them know I was hit and I was going down, and they did, luckily. And then I'm laying there, with my arm just completely dead, and I look down the driveway, and they start marching up the hill. So I just decided I'm not going to die here. I bounced up and ran inside, jumped over a bunch of stuff to get inside. And luckily for me, Lily left that door open for me, and I slammed that door shut, and they were unable to get in. And I think that's what saved my life right there. That definitely saved my life, because they were coming up after me to go ahead and finish me off.
Oh, they were going to finish you.
Yeah.
I had run away by that point. As soon as I heard gunfire, I turned and fucking ran. So I didn't see them come up. I saw them at the gate, but I didn't see them come up like Henza did.
But they clearly weren't after you, Lil.
As far as I know, no. They had clear line of sight. They could have shot me, but they didn't.
Yeah, I'm playing detective again. And I have you guys know, audience doesn't know, but I have my own theory about why this happened, which you guys disagree with, but that's okay. Which I want to talk about, because even if I'm wrong, it illuminates a lot of what was going on. So Jason, did you see their faces?
Yeah.
And
so did
I didn't like to see it at first, because I felt like it could have been cartel. And they're like, "Oh, we don't leave witnesses." But now that my name's off the police report and the police are no interested in talking to me, sure, I saw their faces. But yeah, there was a time where I didn't want to say that out loud, because that just gives them incentive to kill you.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I shouldn't have asked that. Can you, identifying them, of course. I mean, you couldn't identify them anyway because you don't know who they are. But like, what did you see? Who were they? What do they look like?
I saw very young kids, and like when I say kids, I mean, you know, between 21 and 17. Like they didn't look like they were part of any organized anything. Honestly, it looks like normally the kids that we see around the beach, just selling weed on the beach and stuff like that.
Yeah. Okay. And then you got on Facebook after you were shot, right? And
I got
why?
on Facebook first.
You both did.
Okay,
yeah.
so well, I got on Facebook first because I tried calling for help, but the phone that I had a broken microphone, so I couldn't call for help. So I tried using Henza's phone and we had none of the same contacts, so I still couldn't call for help. So the only thing I could think of to do was to go live. And I've had a lot of people like, why would you go live? Why not call the police? Well, like, one, I was an illegal and still am, and was not interested in being deported. And two, I didn't speak Spanish. 3, I didn't have a phone that worked, so I had to use Henza's, and all I could do was go live.
Well, actually, a lot of people saw it right away, didn't they? It was a smart thing to do because you weren't you communicating frequently on Facebook?
We weren't really communicating. Maybe Henza was, but I definitely wasn't. And it's one of those things where, like, especially seeing the video, I'm a little embarrassed about it because
Why?
it's just not my finest moment. Like, I mean, I wish I could have been able to just call people directly, especially because if you look at the YouTube comments on that, it's, oh, she's faking it. And I was like, really? Me in my worst moment of despair looks like I'm faking it? And like, honestly, every time I saw the video and the show, I was just like, stop playing it already.
Oh, you need to not be embarrassed about that at all. I mean, that's one of the most wrenching videos I've ever seen. When I first saw that, I don't think we really knew each other then. And it's just heartrending because you had just gone through that.
Yeah, but it still makes me cringe like a motherfucker. Like Henza's video, like it's sad, but it doesn't make me cringe. But every time I just see like the look on my face, and it's like, I wish I could have had a different way to ask for help. Anything but that.
But
honestly, Lily, it was appropriate in the time. It saved my life. So don't feel bad about that in the least.
Well, to be clear, Henza, like I know they gave Malice the credit for that, but like, you know, for a fact that I was checking the perimeter myself and we were on our way out the house when Malice showed up. He didn't do anything other than show up and freak out. As far as I'm concerned, he came up.
I have to tell you, I was trying to explain to Lily, I'm just going to sit there and die, and that she just needs to be quiet so she doesn't die too. And that I had like reserved my fact, but she was running all over the house, checking the perimeter, going up on the roof and looking. She said she didn't see any of the guys anymore, and yeah, she was going way out of her way to actually save my life and get me down the hill. So she did a really fine job.
Yeah, the way the house was set up, like just from looking out the front of it and the sides of it, you could see the complete hill. And then when you went up on the roof, you could see most of the neighbors' property that was mostly empty, pretty much all the nooks and crannies of it, as well as the driveway, the whole street from that rooftop from various points. So I knew that if I was, you know, if I looked into spots that I needed to, okay, there's nobody there, we can go. And it was just one of those things where like, I wasn't about to wait for somebody. I wasn't about to stay sitting at that house for police to show up. I wasn't about to let Henza die. And we were walking out of the house when Malice showed up. And I do give Malice credit for coming up, but like the reality was we were on our way out of that house. I had already made sure it was clear before he got there. And I did the one driving.
my first thought when Henza said that you did a great job and were, you know, you understood what to do in a way. My very first thought, I wonder if it was Todd's thought too, is this was not the first time armed people had come into your home.
No, I mean, not even the first or the second or maybe even the third. Like I was talking with my aunt the other day And she was reminding me of this time when she was there when like they showed up, and they were essentially, I think they might have been trying to get her husband at the time, or my mom, or both. But it was like one of those things where like they were going to storm into the room, and she was just like, you're going to have to shoot me because there are kids in there sleeping, and I'll be damned if you disturb them. They've already been through too much.
Now, are you talking about the cops or the criminals? Because there's various instances of this happening.
Okay, okay, you're right. So in this circumstance, this is the cops coming in after my parents. I found out like a year or two ago that like my dad's ex-wife was pretty crazy, and she was involved with my mom's ex, and there was a shootout there that either happened right before I was born or right after I was born.
Oh.
Yeah, it's just like
Lily Forester,
chaos from the get.
God.
I mean, it was me. I swear.
I know it's
I was
just
a baby, but like
nothing ever is going to happen to you again. We're going to make sure of this. No, nothing bad. I mean, that whole story. I never even heard of this. There was a shootout between.
I got letters from my mom, because like my mom, the one person that she was honest to in her whole life, and I know that Jerry's going to be watching this, so hey Jerry, but like is Jerry, and she would write her letters in which she would be brutally honest about what was happening. Yeah, she wrote letters when she first got with my dad that were actually very sweet, and then she wrote letters about like the exes coming after them, and also letters about their breakup, which is pretty intense.
Wow.
So
yeah. So how old were you when the cops first broke down the door and held a gun to your head?
Honestly, I have no idea. It's like that whole part of my life is just a blur of like chaos with like intermittent camping memories. Most of it's blocked out, but I do have like glimpses of these things in my memory. There was a whole period where my mom was working for the Hells Angels and my dad was trying to get custody, and like that was pretty crazy. I was like 3 years old at that time, and I have glimpses of that. I have a memory of my mom waking me up in the middle of the night being like, we have to go. Yeah. And then my sister got a hold of a diary later on, and she owed money to the Hells Angels and they were coming to kill her. And we went into hiding for months after that, like even from my dad, who like stalked us down and found me. But like, yeah, it was, I've pretty much had a chaotic life up until I was 26 in 2019, and then things have just been slowly chilling out ever since then, pretty much as I got actual control over my life.
Todd, the Anarchists is 6 hours long, but I'm pretty sure you could do another 6 hours and it would be just as dramatic. There is
you're right.
much.
Yeah.
There was so much that you just couldn't fit into the show for understandable reasons, but there is so much that we're not talking. We're going to talk about some of it, but there's so much that all of us, when we were watching it, we're like, oh my God, this wasn't in it. And this was just equally as dramatic and scary and terrifying. But Lily's life, you know, I've said this since the beginning of the project, like to me, the most compelling moving footage and story is her life in Ohio before she gets to Mexico. I don't know about you, but I mean, I was just so, and her father, Randy, the footage of him, the interviews with him. I mean, the way he choked up talking about her, having been estranged from her for 5 years, finding out why, because of John not letting Lily talk to him. And it was, Randy, I hope is like Henza and Lily here are stars. I mean, I think they're all stars now. A lot of people are.
He's not okay with it. I asked him, I'm like, what do you think? He's just like, I didn't know I was going to be on HBO. What the fuck?
But I think everyone's.
But he's embarrassed by himself, I think, because he's a hermit. He's even more of a hermit than I am. So like, he doesn't want people looking at him, whispering. And
I love Randy. I've never met him, but I love him. I think he's just an amazing person. And like his spirit is just he's so sweet and sensitive and gentle and kind. I mean, that's how he comes across. Is that right?
I mean, he's like me. Most of the time, yes. But like when you push us a little too far, we can get a little crazy. But like, even at my dad's crazy, like the most he's done is like, you know, there was a point where he was like screaming at John saying he wanted to kick his ass. He didn't actually try to, and I told him to stop and he did, but it was one of those things where like, my dad can be pushed to anger, but most of the time he's built a life to where he's, you know, alone or only surrounded by people that aren't going to cause crazy shit. So he's chill.
Let me say something in defense of Randy. If I were your dad, I would have kicked John's ass.
I mean, maybe I should have let him, to be honest, because like that whole situation was ridiculous to start with. And I was just like, I shouldn't have gotten as deep into that as I did. Like I should have fled with my dad the several times I tried to, because there were several times where I called my dad crying, asked him to pick me up. He was there in 40 minutes. And then I asked him to take me back.
Right.
Stockholm syndrome. Gotta love it.
Yeah. John put you in a lot of danger. I mean, of course you chose to do everything. He didn't enslave you, but you know, you were
He didn't physically enslave me, but he did really manipulate me. It was very much like he'd hold everything from like nude photos he had taken of me over me to like, you know, like he was convinced I was going to go to the police if I left. So every time I tried to leave, it was like, you're going to fucking ruin my life. Sometimes there were threats against, you know, he would threaten his own life if I tried to leave, because he's like, I'd rather kill myself than go to prison. And it's like, I'm not going to call the cops on you. How many times? Like, I had my childhood. I don't like the cops enough to call them. So
yeah, let's talk about you, and let's talk about some happier things. Let's talk about your transformation over the last 3 years since the murder happened. It's now 3.5 years. I mean, one of the first things when I saw you in the show, I thought, oh my God. I mean, I'd already seen you do your major transformation, but like just physically, just talk about where you were just physically in your body 3.5 years ago versus now.
I was on a carnivore diet. And I was trying, like, I was on a path trying to help my health. I had, like I mentioned in the show, I had a lot of the same pain and health issues that my mom did. But I was not at all interested in solving them with, you know, drugs and alcohol the way that she did. For one, I don't like alcohol, so that was a no-go for me. And I also, like, beyond weed, and even weed, I haven't smoked in months. So it's like, it wasn't my path. So I was like, I need to figure out another way to fix this. And I found Sean Baker and got on the carnivore diet, and I did that. We were like a couple months carnivore when the murder happened. And after the murder happened, I doubled down on that because it was like my only way to control like my life. It was the only thing I had control over is what I put into my body. So I went hyper carnivore. I did only beef for 6 months. I was eating only beef when I met my boyfriend. It was one of our first conversation things was like, he asked, like, I don't remember how it came up, but I was like, I eat only beef. And he was like, really? But it was the only control I had over my life. But eventually, like, as mentioned also on the show, I'm a good cook and I can cook pretty much anything. And I was really starting to miss other kinds of food. So I started, after like 6 months of only beef, I started slowly reintegrating things. And sometimes taking them out again and trying carnivore again. And then sometimes going, you know, back into trying to eat more of a balanced diet. But it was a combination of getting into a new healthy relationship and letting that blossom and just chilling the fuck out. You know, like at that point, the only like illegal thing I was doing other than existing illegally in Mexico was smoking some weed. And I was finding jobs, you know, through the community for crypto and just trying to take care of myself. But really, like the last year, after Acapulco 2021, I used some of the money that I made from that whole time, really, because I had a lot of things going at that time, not just working for Acapulco, but I used some of that money for dental work, and I spent like $2,000 getting, you know, this nice smile that you see in the show. And I just kept working on my health. I had a copper IUD in, and I got that taken out like last year in July. And I started the healing process from that torture device. And then I started about May last year. I finally, I was looking for a way to get physically active because I knew that I needed some outlet.
Yeah.
And walking around the city was not cutting it. So I found out that there's a circus scene in the city that I live in. And I found one circus gym and I started going to aerial silks classes. And I ended up switching gyms. The reason why is not necessarily important, but I'm glad that I did because the gym I ended up with is where I found my circus family and where I really got obsessed. And I go there as often as I can and I train. And my favorite things are the silks and the trapeze. I'm still sore from training with a professional guy known as Havo Circus. He's pretty cool. And I was just trying to take care of my body and trying to, have as much fun as I possibly could manage. I got my hair cut. I got rid of my dreads, which was shown in the show. And I didn't just get rid of them because of the symbolic connotation. As an autistic woman, sleeping on a pile of ropes every night was getting to me. I'm not about that. I don't even like sleeping on my hair. I put it up, when I sleep to keep it out from under me. It wasn't for me. So I kind of started just releasing each of these things from the past. I got a bunch of tattoos because I always wanted to do that. And with each thing that I did, it kind of evolved me into what you see in the show and really beyond that. I also got glasses, which I found out at Acapulco 2021. I saw this guy that looked kind of like Henza from afar, and I screamed, I got a nickname for Henza, is Ho-Ass Henza. And I screamed Ho-Ass Henza at this random guy, and he goes, what? Oh. And I'm like, oh, I need glasses. Found out I have astigmatism. It's just all of these things coming together. And I've, just been working hard on that. I've been making strides recently to fix my gut. So I'm even able to eat more than I used to be able to eat without, the bloating and sickness that I was dealing with pre-carnivore diet. I'm somewhat convinced a lot of my illness there came from the toxic situation that I was living in. It was kind of against who I was in a lot of ways. And I needed something else. So when I ended up out of that situation, I was like, okay, I didn't get killed in that. I'm going to take care of this body and make it last as long as I can and try and enjoy life as much as possible.
It's truly inspirational. I know that's a cliche, but to watch your transformation in every way, not just physically, but in psychologically, and to have been there for it while you were doing it, really, it's so inspiring. To come from where you were and to be where you are now. I mean, you were in a concrete box 3 years ago on the run, thinking you were going to get shot to death any moment. You had no money, no capital, no nothing. And here you are now. And talk about your passion now, and I love this, is aerial silks. So a lot of people won't know what that means. Can you just describe it for people who don't know what that is?
So it's kind of like the Cirque du Soleil arts. I would really try any of those arts except for hair hanging, which is literally hanging suspended by your hair. Yeah. But aerial silks is it's like aerial yoga, but you hang from two fabrics that come down from the ceiling. Or one, there's a hammock version that I don't really do much with. It's more for beginners, but I get myself tangled up in either a trapeze or fabric at least 4 times a week. And it was something I always wanted to try when I was younger. And I didn't think it was expensive in the United States. And eventually I got the chance and I tried it. And that first class, I was stuck on it. And I was like, oh man, I am weak as hell, but I'm going to do this. And yeah, I kind of rolled with it. Now I've done one performance. I'm about to do another small performance, not huge performances, just local things, but I'm performing with it. It's part of what gets me excited in the mornings. On days where I have class, I wake up and I'm like, fuck yeah, I'm going to class today, which is wild. I would have never gotten excited about going to the gym before, but it's just there's something about flying and the flexibility that comes with it. Because like I've been making this comment ever since I started: flexible body, flexible mind. The more flexible and strong I become physically, the more I do so mentally. Like it's helped me really trust both myself and my body a lot, because with silks, it's all in your grip, and it's a lot of it's mental. Like you can tell yourself, oh, I can't do this part of it. And if you tell yourself that, and I've noticed with other girls that I've seen, like they're more afraid of it and they're less trusting of their bodies and they end up struggling more. Whereas I know what I'm capable of and I know what I'm not capable of, and I'm able to just kind of flow through it. And
It's interesting.
It's the thing that excites me out.
Yeah, it's interesting that you say you're trusting your body when you're doing this, because you've had a lifetime of struggling with your body.
Yes, exactly. For me, like I didn't really start to love, like, you know, I wanted to take care of my body after the murder, but I certainly did not love it. But like I really started to love my body really within the first month of silks, because like I started and you get that first climb, the first time you manage to climb, and you're just like, oh, okay. And then you get yourself into, you know, your first pretty position, and then you do the first drop. Like drops are one of my favorite things, because you are literally just spinning and flopping through the air, and it's all down to whether or not you set yourself up right in the trick. If you didn't, you could really hurt yourself. But I have enough trust of myself just from like that first month of classes that I was like, no, I could definitely do this. And part of what I loved about it is, like, a lot of people know I like to crochet. Well, like especially silks is literally kind of crochet with the body. You make a lot of loops and you wrap things certain ways, just like you do in crochet, which is why I'm more able to just trust it. Like I watch my teacher and he's like, okay, you wrap this leg and then you put this leg up here and then you put the silk around that foot and then you put it back there. And like, I can see some of the other girls that don't have the same crochet background as I do kind of get lost in that. Whereas to me, it's just learning a new stitch, but with my body.
Right.
And once you're up there and you complete it, and then, you know, all the girls in the gym are like, see, Lily, you know, it's just like, okay.
It's beautiful.
I found community in an unexpected place.
That's the best part. That's the most important part, I think. But yeah, I've seen a lot of the videos you've sent me of you doing that. It's beautiful. And I think you're very talented. And I think you have a career in it.
Ideally so. Like I want to get my legal problems fixed so I can safely travel. And I want to find, you know, even if I'm just bouncing around from different show to different show or traveling with a circus, it's kind of a dream of mine, because I follow quite a few professional artists on TikTok, and they're like, yes, we do this 3 times a day for, you know, 6 weeks, and then we go to this other amazing city and then do it all over again. Mm-hmm. And it's like, I could do that. And I could have a lot of fun with it.
I just think it's perfect that you would end up as a circus performer after a life that's been a circus.
It's just jumping from one circus to the next.
Exactly. Right. Exactly. That's the joke. Yeah. All right. So back to you, Todd. So all of us came together in Acapulco in February of 2019, right after the murder had happened at Acapulco during the conference. And I think I said to you at the time, I said, you know, this is really kind of cold-blooded, but it's just a fact that you now have a hit on your hands because of the murder. This is going to become this is now a very different project, and it's a project with, unfortunately, I guess, a very large commercial appeal. And so I thought that this was going to be a big deal, which it ended up becoming. Can you talk about that? Because, you know, then fast forward a year or two later, then you had agents and you were talking to big shots in Hollywood and production companies, and you ended up with Blumhouse. Like that was a strange, I mean, and when we were working on this together, like in 2019, you guys, all of us were so poor, so broke. And it was rough. I mean, really, really rough. And next thing you know, you're making an HBO 6-part series, you know, with Blumhouse, for God's sake. So, I mean, that must have been quite, like, I don't know, talking about culture shock, like jarring. What was that like to go from where you were to being in Hollywood?
It was the most emotionally complicated chapter of my life.
Yeah.
We had been making this project, which at the time we thought was going to be a feature, and we saw it as being a sort of quirky character exploration of this community that maybe we could, put in festivals, but it was difficult because of the subject matter. We don't have an advocacy angle to it, so there was no nonprofit funding. So yeah, the first years, several years, it was all the way up until because the other producers started calling very quickly after the murder. It wasn't even years; it was just a matter of months
Oh, wow.
before we were taking meetings. But we had positioned ourselves. We had social media out there, which was partially to just have a place to send people in the anarchist community, to go to know who we were. But yeah, when the murder happened, we were the only outside account of this community that was in Acapulco. The fact that there were people living there. There was a lot out there about Anarchapulco, but a lot of the media coverage was saying there was a documentary being made about this couple who was attacked and about this community. So yeah, and we were dead broke. Kim and I, my wife and creative partner, who's also in the show, we were struggling. We were renting a room in a house just outside of Los Angeles. We had just started our production company, so anything we made off of our freelance gigs was going back into the company and going back into trying to fund our next trip down to Acapulco. And yeah, it was a struggle. We were trying to crowdfund, but it was hard. We didn't have much going on that front. So it was really terrifying to go down to Acapulco in that situation, knowing we, just like John and Lily, not nearly as extreme, but a lot of the people who went down there, we didn't have much. We didn't have much to fall back on. And at the same time, we're getting approached by money and people with interest who see dollar signs. And it was a long journey between then. And even though we were taking meetings just within the months after getting back to Los Angeles after that trip in early February, we, were very, very careful with who we wanted to partner with. And it was still, I would say, almost 2 years before we actually got any substantial funding. So we continued to be covering the story for 2 more years after on our own, and until we finally partnered with Blumhouse and eventually HBO, and we had the backing. But it was hard. I mean, it's just the nature of doing a documentary or journalism in general is other people's suffering can be beneficial to your career. It has me questioning whether or not I want to continue filmmaking in the documentary format, at least in this verite sense of talking about people's lives, just the complexity and the liability of all of that. It's important work, but also it's hard. It's been hard. It still is hard. We're still, even after it's come out, often wondering about the effects and implications of what we've done. And especially given Lily's situation, it's a strange career path.
Indeed. So you chose Blumhouse, which is famous for making horror movies. Why did you choose them?
We had been talking to a few different production companies. After the murder happened, we obviously had to rewrite our story to include it. So we had pitch materials, we had a sizzle reel, but we needed to overhaul that to update it to how things had changed and what was going on. And we were networking with some other producers who had helped us set up some meetings with production companies. We had one offer from one company who was attached to a big network who were willing to finance us outright. They only saw our new sizzle reel. Wow. And they, just based off of that, they were ready to, put us out there and get us going. But we had another company who was more of the traditional doc space, who was also interested, but based on their other materials, and they were kind of more interested in doing it as a feature. And we didn't even know at the time. I mean, we were barely familiar with Blumhouse. We kind of had this idea that they did horror films, and we had no idea that they were involved in documentaries. But we managed to set up a meeting with them at the beginning of March 2020. and it was the only in-person pitch meeting we did, and it was the last pitch meeting in person that they had taken before the pandemic. And yeah, it was it went really well. It was like, Mary Licio, who was the producer, the executive at Blumhouse at the time for their documentary content, was just ecstatic about the story. She loved the access we had and what we were doing. And yeah, I mean, it was a strange fit at first, but also they were willing to take on controversial subject matter, and they were willing to give us the creative space to do our thing and tell the story, through our eyes. And yeah, it was a strange pairing, but it worked out. And from the very beginning too, it was like, I mean, you don't get much more prestigious with documentaries than HBO, so I had always been kind of focused, because the next step was, we had a production company with a reputation, so I was getting it to a network, and I really just targeted it toward an HBO audience. And every pitch that we gave to all of the networks, I was still kind of thinking HBO, and yeah, it worked out. And the team over there have just been awesome and supportive. And there's, the whole HBO documentary films is run by this awesome group of really experienced, pretty much all women who just have a great sensibility and sensitivity to subjects. And yeah, they were amazing partners to work with. So yeah, we had to hold out and continue to be broke and poor for years, while we were going to these fancy meetings and dealing with these, dealing with Hollywood. But it was, yeah, we're grateful that we held out, and yeah, I think it worked out. I'm really happy with how things turned out.
Oh, well, I've been telling you this every Sunday night for the last 6 Sundays. When the episodes air, it is just beautifully crafted. And I guess what are called production values are extraordinary in this. I mean, the editing, the sound, you had an original soundtrack made, which has some of Kim's music in it. Kim's a musician, and so as are you, her band Kyland, which you're part of. And then you had a world-class composer make the soundtrack, right?
Yeah, Antonio Sanchez. He's known largely for his work on Birdman. He's a jazz drummer is his creative origin, but he's in the past decade very much moved into the film music space. And yeah, I mean, I kind of like wasn't really sure the direction with music. I was kind of willing to go with whatever great composer we could get, but then it was really late in the game. We had a couple other composers fall through, and he happened to come up. His agent, who we had talked with, put him on a list, and I was like, oh my God. And I had just rewatched Birdman too, and something just about the idea of jazz and anarchism, it kind of it just seemed like a good fit. And even though the soundtrack is not necessarily jazz, the elements are there in Antonio's percussion, which is it really lends to the decentralized nature of the subject matter, which is something I think is reflected in jazz music.
Yeah. No, it's just beautifully done, and it's so dramatic. And I mean, I got to think that the Blumhouse sensibility had a lot to do with that. I mean, they're obviously extremely good at heightening drama, or maybe melodrama, right? And finding those crackling moments where you're just riveted. It seemed like they just found that every time, or you did together with them every single time. I mean, the editing, astonishing.
Yeah. I mean, I would say the best thing about Blumhouse was that they were very, very hands off. Like we got to pick all of our own team, all of our entire creative team. Really, they were people that we vetted and picked. And a big plus about working with HBO is that you get to attract top talent. So we had world-class documentary editors that we were working with to help craft the story, and some amazing story producers who were helping us dig for archival materials. And so it was just a fantastic turn of events, the partners we ended up with. And
Can I say something real quick?
Yes.
I will say that you guys managed to make my own life feel binge worthy, because I agree in terms of the production quality, because every episode it would end and I was just like, damn it. you know, and I knew what was happening and I knew what to expect more or less. Like as you would start to talk about certain things like, oh, I kind of know what this person's going to say, kind of know what this person's going to say, but it still was like, it was interesting enough, even me knowing all of the details, for me to be like, you know, excited for each episode and excited to see how it played out, especially the last episode. Like I had a hunch of what to expect, but that was my favorite episode for me personally, because you saw like all the good parts.
Yeah, well, something that was actually, it's funny you say the last episode too, because something that's kind of cool about this project, and it's never going to happen again in my career, is you can just see my growth as a filmmaker through watching the show. Because early in the show, we're very limited. The assets we have to work with, it's a lot of archival, it's very patchy, where by the end, both Kim and I together have kind of gotten into our flow, and Kim is a production sound mixer and I'm a cinematographer, and our skills over the 6 years just grew tremendously. So that's a big part of it. But also, I mean, Lily, your story is just binge worthy on its own. I think even if we didn't have a decent budget and it was still independent, I think this, you know, still would have been an addictive story to watch. So I appreciate the compliment, but it's like also it just the, you know, Henza too. I mean, your openness and honesty to tell your story. We've heard so many people reaching out to us.
Yes.
You more than anyone, Henza. People are just like, I love Henza. Like there's just something about him. He's so earnest and real, and it's so comforting to just see someone who is willing to be honest about themselves and their shortcomings. And yeah, and I've even told Henza this, like he's a hero of mine. Just the stoicism and strength and just willingness to change and adapt to his life situations have just inspired me in many ways. And I often, like the conversations we've had on camera and off camera, have shaped how I think about the world. So yeah, I give just as much credit to you guys as I can take.
Oh yeah, I endorse that. Speaking of poverty, Jason Henza, you were living until just recently in a windowless room. Am I right?
Yes, you are right about that.
Yeah. What was the rent?
It was $100 a month. I decided the extra $50 was worth the windows.
Henza's poor by choice currently, though, in terms of like, a lot of people think that Henza is like, you know, was living off of the X primarily, and I think that's a little bit wrong, because he was, you know, skipping meals to live off of his measly $600 a month, and then he got the job driving freight around the country, and even still having a savings from doing that, he's the only person I've ever known that's like, oh yeah, I'm a minimalist, that like isn't just poor, you know, because I know a lot of people that are like, yeah, I'm a minimalist, things don't matter, but like Henza could have lots of things, but he chooses not to, and he's the only person I know that like really sticks to that. Like everything that Henza carries with him has a fucking purpose, otherwise it's not coming with him. Even sentimental items, like if I want to give Henza something sentimental, it has to be small and lightweight.
Are you a Puritan? Are you ascetic?
I don't know what that is, to be honest with you. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Am I coming through? Okay. Yeah, I have no idea what that is. Typically, what I've learned over the years is property tends to force me in a situation where I have to take care of it. So, and the more responsibility you have, the less freedom that you have. So I have chosen a life with less possessions to maximize my freedom.
Let's stay there for a second, because this comes back to the question I asked Todd at the beginning, which is about sort of anarchism and libertarianism and anarcho-capitalism. And I mean, certainly Jeff Berwick and Nathan Freeman and the leaders of Acapulco at the time were all about not just capitalism, but about making money and spending money and enjoying it and doing lots of drugs and having big parties and living in fancy condos overlooking Acapulco Bay and all the rest of it, right? You're sounding like a very different kind of person than them.
Yeah, well, there has been a bit of a shift in my wealth, and every action I take has ripples. and I have to be really careful not to affect the environment around me and destabilize the area and gentrify, so that way the locals cannot live comfortably as they always have. And usually I'm very cautious and direct in how I spend money. I'm generous when I tip, but I don't necessarily allow people to gouge me in prices when they approach me with a product that I may or may not want to buy.
But you said something about 2 minutes ago that I'm still thinking about because it's so amazing. It's a very serious intervention in political philosophy, which is, and anarchists and libertarians need to listen to this. You said something about how owning property, when you own property, you have to take care of it. And I think what you meant was that it ends up limiting your freedom. Is that right? That property limits your freedom?
Yeah, the capital or the commies like to call it personal possessions and not property. The capitalists will call it property. So it's just the legal stices that they all get confused and argue over. Anyway, so my personal possessions, basically, the more I have to take care of, the less free I am, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And a lot of people, they collect a whole bunch of stuff, and then they need a big house to take care of it, and they got to pay taxes on the house, and they got to mow the lawns, and then they're being told how to take care of the house, and so on and so forth, to where their freedom is basically controlled by a governing body.
Yeah. This is, I haven't heard, this is sort of similar to like 1960s hippie counterculture stuff, right? The sort of back to the land, agrarianism. And that was part of the argument, was that the less you have, the more free you are. I think it's a very powerful argument. I mean, I think that makes a lot of sense.
I think it depends on the person, because for me, like, I'm what they, in Oregon, I was taught of these terms. There's like, you know, the traveling hippies, and then there's what they call the housey hippies. And these are the people that they have their house, they have their home base, they have their safe place, it's got all their stuff. And me, with the work that I do and the hobbies that I have, because I have a great many hobbies that are part of why I'm so happy. Like, part of where my mental changes come from is the free ability to pursue silks, to pursue crochet, to pursue painting sometimes, the work that I do. So for me, I have kind of a different, like, yes, it's not as easy to move my stuff, but when I'm at home, I am free to do whatever I am, like whatever I want to, and I'm not limited because I have, you know, like right in front of me, I have a crochet hook to do what I need to do. I have my computer that's in front of me to do the work that I need to do. I have my silks downstairs to where if my classes stop, like if the world shuts down again, if the world shuts down again, I have circus equipment and I can do my own classes by myself. So I have freedom in that way. Although I definitely understand, I definitely kind of agree with in most cases, not all cases, but especially in the United States, owning property kind of sucks. Property taxes are expensive. There's a lot of like, you can't do this with your property. In Mexico, that's way less. In Mexico, you buy a property, you own it, you can do what the fuck you want to it. You don't really have to like worry about shit. But like in the United States, definitely, like physical owning a piece of land, that right there is a burden. I agree with that. But like possessions for an artist can be a source of freedom as well.
Totally.
One thing I will say on the notion of owning property in Mexico, we heard a story of one interview that was cut from the show. We were with the woman who runs the turtle sanctuary in Bonfil, which is a central part of the Acapulco conference. Not central, but like a recurring thing. There's a party where there's this refuge for turtles where they help them, reproduce. And the woman was telling us a story of how there was a neighbor who in Mexico who just had their house stolen by the cartel, like an entire house stolen by the cartel. So I mean, I get the idea that like you have, building codes and regulations in the United States, but
it depends where you are in Mexico. Like the area of Acapulco is a hotbed. Like
totally. And Mexico is a huge country with, even every city within Mexico has its own neighborhoods that are very, very different. But The comparison between the U.S. and Mexico as far as freedom goes, I think in line with this conversation, it depends what you want to do in your life. Everyone's notion of freedom is different. This is something that Henza clearly articulates at the end of the series: is that people value different things, and what is free to one person, what is freedom to one person, is different to another person, and it's all very subjective. So, yeah, I've dabbled. I spent a lot of time in Mexico, but Kim and I, my wife, we've grown very comfortable in our suburban Nashville home, and it's a pain in the ass. Just yesterday we got a notice. We rent a house here. We got a notice from our landlord, who's a big corporation, and they're difficult to deal with. And we have an HOA too, that is another layer of government above us. And they're bugging us because we happen to let our weeds grow a little too long for a couple of days, and we have to pay fines and worry about that. But on the whole, we are feeling comfortable and enjoy our lives here. But this is what we want. We want to have a home studio where we can make music and work, just like Lily wants to. She has her own things, and Henza's lifestyle is awesome too. I'm envious of his sense of freedom and the ability to not have to worry about these things and to just exist more in the moment and not be bound by governing hierarchies. So
now, Todd, you know what a punk rocker or an anarchist would say to you right now? You're a sellout.
Yes.
No, I think freedom is down to the individual, and that's what I've learned. I'm still very much an agorist, but I'm not a community agorist anymore. I've focused mostly on my own individual freedom over the last year, separate from a community.
Yes.
And for me, that looks like having a stable house with all of the craft and, circus supplies that I need to keep myself happy. For Henza, that's being able to pick up and move and go where he wants at a moment's notice without having a lot of shit to carry. And for Todd, that looks I think there's no right way to do freedom, because what it looks like for each person is completely different. Everybody's needs are very different.
Well, speaking of that, go ahead.
I can add to my personal thoughts on freedom is at any time, coercers and the bludge can just break into my life and take whatever the hell they want, because I'm not as strong as I should be or can be, because a lot of things are taken away from me, such as the right to own a gun in this area, or people just don't value as much. So I'm at the point where okay, go ahead and take it, and I can just rebuild at any time, and there isn't much to rebuild. There's no great loss when they take it all, type of thing. I didn't spend my entire life building all these little arbitrary things that, well, they're kind of nice to look at, but they don't really mean a lot to me. And I just feel like I don't want anybody to coerce me in the future. I'm just putting myself in that position.
Okay, but you and Lily have taken quite different paths recently, I would say, which is, she just said that she moved toward her own personal freedom. She focused on herself individually over the last 3.5 years. And we talked about the results of that. You have continued to try to build community, right? In Puerto Vallarta now,
correct.
Instead of Acapulco. What the hell is that community about, and why are you doing that?
Well, this is a community of refugees around the world that are avoiding the vaccines, and their countries have made them not welcome at home anymore. Shut down our economies, don't let them participate in going out and things like that. And it's gotten so bad in some areas that they were in, the police were actually doxing the unvaccinated who would protest and say they have a right, and so that way their neighbors would come and attack them at home. So a lot of these people decided to flee their home countries, such as Canada, New Zealand, the Philippines, and Australia, and places like that. And they have gathered here. Now, they're very new to the ideas of freedom. They aren't sure yet about how to settle things right and do all this stuff. Some would identify as anarchists. Some are just learning about what without ruler means. Sorry, commies. We're just learning how to organize, and I want to learn and experience how things work, how they would work or how they could work in practice, versus sitting around and just thinking about it through a book, and then everyone just collectively believing in my book or idea that I just put out there in the universe. I want to live it. I want to actually do it. And people aren't usually doing it. They're just telling you, you're just not doing it right. You know, like you have to live it to know if you're doing it. You know, like you can't just say, oh, I have this idea. Yeah, and this is how it's supposed to be, but I'm not doing it myself. But this is how you need to do it to make it done right.
So
And I just don't believe it.
I didn't know these were vaccine refugees.
Oh yeah. All vaccine refugees, most of them.
I didn't know
Some
that
are
was a
U.S.
thing.
citizens.
It makes sense. I mean, it makes sense. That's a new category of refugee, vaccine refugee. What's the end goal here? What do you want to create with this? What do you want it to look like in 5 years?
Boy, that's a really good question. Right now, these people are day to day. There is no end goal. It's just learning and experiencing and trying to move forward without coercing each other and living peacefully. All that other stuff. I mean, there's 500 of them down here, or roughly about 500.
Oh my God.
Like we have council meetings. We get together for casual time on Sundays. We were meeting up for the Anarchists. There's obviously plenty of game nights, family events, and stuff like that. So and usually at every meeting, every casual meeting that we have, there's about 40% new faces we haven't seen before.
Wow. Did you say there's a council?
Yeah, there's actually a council. We get together and take minutes and discuss important issues that we're all kind of facing in the community and how to move forward, and stuff like that. There's things that pop up that are just that you have to deal with.
Okay, so do you have rules?
No, not yet.
Oh, no rules. Okay, is that because you're an anarchist?
This council, this council isn't a governing body. This is just a group of people who get together and are recording issues that they're facing within the community. And anybody can have their own council and take minutes and do what they want. We have a website. We've been moving forward, just trying to organize. And it's been about a year. We've gotten through the honeymoon phase of this is the best thing in the world, and now we're starting to have a few disagreements here and there, and we have to learn how to cope when we don't like something, or we have a severe diversity in ideas where people are battling. So that's what we're getting to right now.
Now, what were to happen, Jason, if, let's say, someone went a little crazy in the community and then started like threatening to kill you or other people in the community, and then maybe like someone did get killed in the community? Like how might you just hypothetically, how might you respond to that?
Typically, I believe that whole situation fell on my shoulders. What happened in Acapulco about someone losing their minds, because I started crusading against him, pushing him away, doing the disassociation thing, which I wholeheartedly don't believe in. I believe in that there's always a road to forgiveness, always a road to redemption, and you cannot just completely cut somebody out of your community, because we're a really small community. You do that forever, you're going to ask for violence. You're going to, these people like, oh, it's all or nothing. Okay, I see how it is. And then they want to attack you and fight you. So you kind of self-organize in such a way where you're fair to the person who is the violator, and you're fair to the victim, and you're doing your very, very best not to hurt anybody and move forward. And some appropriate actions need to be made, but ultimately anybody who is seen as a perpetrator, I guess for lack of a better word, I can't even think of a word for it. Someone who's going to hurt somebody else, they need to pay a penance for what they did wrong, and then we have to rehabilitate you back into the community versus just shutting you away forever like we're a bunch of Jehovah's Witnesses.
Todd, we need to send a film crew down there right now to Puerto Vallarta this time, and they need to just camp out with
this
Jason.
right here. That's why I avoid communities. Sorry, my earbuds keep falling. That's why I avoid communities altogether, is because I'm not to a point where I can help other people get over their craziness. I would rather just be alone and leave everybody to their crazy devices. And protect myself as much as possible. That's one way in which Henza and I really differ. I just don't have it in me. The desire to like fix and mend and stuff. Like, it's easier to just move on from situations that are volatile that I can't control than it is for me to fix them, because it's not my job to fix them.
Right.
I look at it as a economic situation. I mean, we need to cooperate with many people across far distances just to build a pencil. And we have to learn how to cooperate with each other voluntarily over time. And we cannot just say, okay, the hell with the world and expect everything to continue to work going forward. We have to reach out and still build community and learn how to cooperate so we can continue to innovate for the betterment of all people. And sometimes when you get reclusive, which is perfectly okay, there's nothing wrong, like for you wanting to do that right now in this moment, because you've been through a shit full, like a whole lot. So I'm never going to ask you to participate in stuff that makes you feel uncomfortable. But as far as people in general, getting together and cooperating is the only way that we innovate and grow going forward, so that we can have all these creature comforts that we really care about.
Well, to be clear, I'm not a complete recluse. Because I mean, as I've mentioned in my blog posts, I'm co-producer of Anarchapulco now. I still am very much involved with the community. But the difference there, we just have a different way of handling things. And the reason I work for Anarchapulco is because of Catherine Bonendine, who is the other producer, the main producer of it. She's my best friend. She's my sister from another Mista. But like, I work so well with her that working with her and working with that team has allowed me to really like build what I would like to see in teams. And we do still very much practice dissociation. We don't practice alienation, but if somebody's causing problems, causing a lot of drama, making it hard for us to work, we will do mediation. We will find ways to cut ties and move on. But the whole idea is like, how do we work together well as a team to build what we want to see? And the reason I work with Anarchapulco is because the team that we've built, for the most part, is pretty, we call it the dream team, and it kind of works like that. So it's just one of those things, or it's a different way of going about it. We very much practice, like everybody in our team has to read the book, The Four Agreements. And The Four Agreements is a book written by a Mexican that is very much, it changed my life in a lot of ways. Like it goes on these agreements that, you make with yourself, which are like things you might say about yourself or your community, like everything from I'm smart and I'm stupid to, people are evil or people are good. And it invites you to adopt different agreements, like don't assume things, don't take things personal, be impeccable with your words. So instead of saying, I'm absolutely going to do this by this time, say things like, I will try to do things by this time. And it's revolutionized how I work with other people and allowed me to work with even other teams other than Anarchapulco, professionally speaking, in a positive, like productive manner. So it's one of those things where like, there's different ways to go about it. As far as living within like a community of anybody can come, let's see what happens, that's what I keep my distance from. But like very intentional, this is how we want to interact with each other and how we're going to interact with the world. When we have disagreements, we're going to do it with respect. We're not going to attack the other person. We're not going to deal with you. And have that be understood from the beginning, it's led to a really different dynamic in my experience.
So it's really interesting that both of you are talking about how a community deals with a problematic individual within it, because I want to finish this interview by talking about something that's going to bring us back to less pleasant topics, but I need to do this. I need to get this off my chest. I want to talk about John, and
okay.
I want to talk about my theory as to what happened, because I think even if I'm completely wrong, I do think in talking about it, we will illuminate a lot about who John was and what your relationship was like. And all three of you knew him very well. So I think we will learn a lot about him and some stuff that wasn't covered in the show. So my theory, as you guys know, is that Paul did not kill him. the cartel did not kill him. My theory is that local drug dealers who lived a block from your house killed him. And I'll tell the evidence. So you were posting on Steemit, you were blogging on Steemit, Lily, and this is in the show, people know this, for a long time. And one of your blog posts was about how John got into a big fight with these local guys, like in your neighborhood on the hill. And he ended up ramming his truck, the yellow truck, into their car and pushing them down the hill. Then you told me that he also turned them into the police. So those are the facts about that. And then almost exactly a year after that, there was an article I looked up. I did research in the local Acapulco newspaper, and I found a news report exactly 1 year later of several people who had been arrested 1 block from your house. And it made sense to me that those were the people. Turns out that they were local drug dealers who were not cartel connected. It didn't look like, just low level people, but who had guns and who had weed. And it seemed to me that that's the kind of person who would have the motivation to kill John. I would actually, frankly, understand it if someone rammed their truck into my car and pushed me down the hill and threatened me and then turned me into the cops and sent me to prison. That's a high degree of motivation I would have to kill him. So why don't we address that? I want you guys to try to knock that down, each of you.
Okay,
so we can
I'll
talk
start.
about yeah, go ahead.
Okay, well, I'll start. Those guys, it was actually 2 people. One of them was from the neighborhood. One of them wasn't. The one that was from the neighborhood didn't even live there. He just had family down the road. They were poor. It was a very poor neighborhood. These guys didn't even have enough money to have their own car. They had stolen a taxi and painted it in front of our house. This is outlined in the story on Steemit. And these people were arrested. And the thing with jail in Mexico, I'm hearing a lot of background noise, like a crazy amount.
It's not bad.
Okay. So the thing was, like, yes, they were arrested, but the thing that I've heard from many different people about jail in Mexico is, like, once you're in, you don't really get out unless you have money. And these people did not have money. They really didn't. And the guns that they came to our house with were expensive guns. Those guns are minimum 50,000 pesos a piece. And to have 6 of those guns or 4 of those guns, that's 200,000-300,000 pesos. Where are they going to get that from? I am not so convinced of that theory for that reason. I have my other theories, but, like, I think it was a storm of things. I think it was Paul. I think it was a lot of things, and maybe I shouldn't go into all of my theories here. There's theories Henza and I have discussed that we think, could be possible. But as far as I'm concerned, it doesn't completely matter too much other than what the end result was, and that was, like, total chaos and devastation.
Yeah. It also matters, even if I'm completely wrong, because I think it speaks to who John was. I mean,
well, yeah, like, Paul would not have been so angry against John had John not emotionally abused him when he lived with us. Like, right. And John, like, and I know his family, specifically his mom, watching this, it's caused quite a bit of a rift, me being honest about what I went through during that time, because you see in the documentary, me in the weeks after the murder, I was very much like, oh, I want to be like Shane, but I was very much experiencing a sort of Stockholm syndrome in that I had spent almost 8 years in a very emotionally abusive, and in some other ways that I'm not going to get into, abusive relationship. It was brutal. And, like, the reality was I had more good memories with his family than I did with him. And then Paul came in, and every so often, that abuse would get deflected towards somebody else. Like, the best friend that was shown of John's in that episode where it talked about his memorial and stuff, Ricky, when I met John, he was the one that was getting the shit at that time. And then it got, diverted to me, and then sometimes it would bounce back and forth between us until Ricky went on his own. And then when Paul lived with us, it was another one of those situations where he kind of, like, I was not so much the problem, because I was at least doing or trying to do things, and Paul was such a mess, like such a fuck up, that it was easy to, and he would just, like, are you really even an anarchist type of thing, just being really mean to him. And then, like, he wondered why, once we finally kicked him out, And once Paul had the cartel on his back, well, who else is he going to point the finger towards but the guy that just emotionally abused him for like 6 months?
Sure.
Especially, like, and it was one of those things where in the weeks before the murder, John, he apologized to me a lot. And I don't know how much it would have actually like ended up in a change, but one of the things he apologized for two things. One was creating Paul in the way that he did. And by that, I mean, like, he made Paul into that enemy by treating him the way that he did. And bringing him into our house to start with. And the second one was like, you can see this in Paul's posts if you go look him up. Some of the posts, especially pre-murder, were like, Lily's up there being abused, like Lily needs a new boyfriend type of things. Like there was one post I think even dedicated to finding me a new boyfriend. Mm-hmm. And John was like, I am really embarrassed that there's even any sort of truth in those posts to what our relationship dynamic is. And I was like, well, and we were in the process of like finding a way to break up in an adult manner when the murder happened. Like most of my stuff was moved out of that house. I did like my crochet stuff was moved out of that house. I had a house down the road that was literally a mud hut that had everything but my computer and my dogs and my camera, which are the 3 really big things that I think I lost out of that house. I was sleeping in a different room when the murder happened. I was sleeping in the second bedroom. Oh. It was a very, like he was aware of the effect that he had on people. He was also aware of the fact that, like, say for Henza, because Henza, sometimes in my opinion can be to a fault, but I love Henza for this. He tries to see the good in everybody, and he's really the only one we didn't manage to scare away, because like people would come close to us, they would stay with us sometimes, and then they would see the dynamic and then they would leave. Like I had a friend who I've lovingly called the Englishman, and the last night he stayed with us, he was like drunk dancing around the house. John was in bed and he was altering the lyrics of the song to say things like, John better start treating Lily right and stuff like that, because he had seen a lot of really horrible things, and so did a lot of the people that stayed with us. So like there's a reason why part of the a lot of the community was so against us and willing to believe certain things. That's what led to the situation that more or less transpired. It was a perfect storm of things. Yeah, it was Paul's PTSD, in a way, John's PTSD to his childhood. Something also not mentioned in the series is when he started having those tantrums at 2.5 years old was when his mom tried to replace his dad with a fucking asshole whose name I won't put out here, but he was a complete douche. Like, and she replaced his dad and was like, this is your daddy now. And the guy fucking hated Shane and treated him like shit. And he later started to see that he essentially became that guy out of spite to the people that he loved, or claimed to love, at least. Because like, if I'm being honest, I heard, are you fucking retarded more times than I heard, I love you in that relationship. And that's not okay. I've been trying to like be open about it, because that's not okay. I don't want people thinking it was this big romantic love story when it was really a hot mess. Like, it was a dumpster fire of a relationship. And I was too traumatized from when my mom died to like pull myself out of it. It was a lot of things.
Yeah. Thank you for saying all that. And I guarantee you, I promise you, Lily, one day I will stop asking you questions about this. You will no longer have to talk about this stuff. I promise you, soon. But I do want to finish this. I mean, Jason, I want to hear from you. I haven't actually talked to you about this particular issue, like my theory of the murder. What is your theory? I mean, what do you think happened and why?
Well, I'm a victim, and a lot of victims tend to circulate their trauma back out into the world and people that they're angry at. And I'm doing everything I can to avoid doing something like that, such as who had motive to do it, why did they have motive, stuff like that. I like to stick with the evidence to kind of be fair to anybody out there, because if I'm wrong, I could change lives. I could hurt people socially or financially or even freedom wise. And as far as I know, I have 6 months of evidence about Paul, and it's Paul alone. Somehow he got his hands on some money, and Paul paid some beach kids to come up and shoot us. And that is the best of my ability. Everything else goes. And I caution the entire community of drawing these correlations of the cartel itself, just doing it because John was involved in drugs. It definitely paints us in a very, very bad light to the cartel, that they have to keep an eye on us going forward, because we weren't involved in that kind of stuff, pushing that stuff around. So like, you know, to keep circulating, it's going to get the cartels all riled up about us, and we're just not doing that. Right. So yeah, socially responsibly, I just think it was Paul, and that's the best I can put out there. And unfortunately, Paul took his life, and he never had a chance to make up for all the things that he did wrong in this world. And it's pretty sad when you lose 2 lives like this, and it's just it just hurts that I played a part in this failure.
Yeah, in regards to circulating trauma, I do want to say something about that, because like I mentioned previously, I have other theories that I'm not necessarily willing to state here. And it involves people that like I've never really had good times with. But the thing is, I have no 100% proof or evidence for these theories to be able to like really put, and I've shared one of these theories with you privately, that it's just like, I got to think about who I want to be in this world. Do I want to be, it was them, they fucking did it, or it fucking happened, let's move on, instead of, I don't want to be like how we'll say other people have been to me in the past, because, it's, as we saw by the film, there are people that have pointed big fingers. And that's just not how I saw how that was received. And it's like, that's just not the type of person I want to be. Even if I do have a strong hunch on something, that's not how I want to be in this world. I would rather find another, way to exist that doesn't just point the finger elsewhere.
There's a delicate line between justice and peace. And we have to be responsible in our actions to achieve both. And I feel like it is more important in this time, echoing what Lily says, that peace is most important going forward. And that we don't constantly circulate all this agitation, the social agitation that we have towards this one traumatic experience. And we move forward and we learn how to grow and get better at our lives and socializing with one another. And I would rather build what I want to see in the world with people like Kat and people like Henza and the people that I do work with, my circus troupe, with my boyfriend, than focus on getting justice from somebody that harmed me or, may have harmed me or may not have. I've had people reach out to me like trying to solve the murder, and I'm like, I am not interested. I don't want to find these 4 to 6 dudes that came up to my house and what is that going to do for me? It's not going to do anything. And it's going to give them no chance to do something better with their lives. Like, I would rather just let it be as it is and hope that those guys, because like the one thing I will say is I made eye contact with one of those guys and he looked just as scared as I was. He looked terrified. And I was like, I hope that somehow they can get out and find another way to exist. And if not, that's okay, but I'm not going to be the one to go and serve justice on them and get them put in prison, or anybody else that I think may have been involved. I have my theories, but it's not important to me to bring somebody else down to push myself up. That's why I do silks, is I go and I climb as high as I can by myself, by my own strength. I don't have to put somebody else down to do that.
Right. Also, I think it's important that both of you still live in Mexico. So peace and avoiding recriminations and all that makes a lot of sense when you're still there. Yeah. But everything both of you just said makes a lot of sense to me. And I really appreciate you saying it. And again, I hope one day, I promise you one day, we will stop talking about this. But Todd, I do want to hear you on this. I mean, I raised this with you, my theory, years ago, I think. And obviously you didn't include it in the film, so I guess you didn't buy it. But just talk about why and what, which is totally fine. But what's your thing? I mean, you do present a theory that was Nathan Freeman's theory in the show, which sounded very complicated to me. But I guess, do you want to weigh in on this, or you don't have to?
Yeah, sure. I mean, really, when we found out about the murder, I would say we were shocked, but not surprised.
Yeah. Right.
Same.
Right.
Yeah, we were
right.
following what was going on. We were seeing the conflicts with Paul and other members of the community. We were aware of what had happened with the incident with the locals between John. We had seen the Steemit posts. So, I mean, yeah, I can really just echo, there was so much going on, so much conflict. It's really hard to say exactly how specifically things went down. There were half a dozen or more interconnected theories that had overlapping conflicts with different individuals. But from a filmmaking perspective, it was difficult because I didn't set out to make a true crime documentary. But it was the crime that was attracting producers and financing. And it was a delicate balance, even from the pitching phase of this show, which is how much are we going to say this is going to be about the crime, about the murder. And I made the decision to put it really out there. And if you if you were there in the pitch meeting, we did put the murder right up front. And I was worried about doing that because I was afraid we would have the expectation that this was going to be a true crime show. Right. But a producer friend of mine gave me the advice. I was expressing this after I had done this, and he said, tell them what they want to hear, and then you give them what they need. And It was a process. Once we actually, just over a year ago, started digging into the materials, and we worked. I met in New York with our first editor who came on the show, Adrian Murray, who's amazing talent. He was the one who was on episode 1, and I kind of revealed to him. I was like, okay, like this is what everyone's been saying, but this is not a murder mystery. And the murder is not going to be the first thing that appears in the show. And it's not going to be about who killed John. This is a story about a community. And the only way you're going to realize that is by looking at the footage and getting into the story. And even from that point, we dialed it back to, there were going to be episodes 4 and 5 were going to be about the murder and, trying to figure out what happened. So there'd be a little subplot. But as we got into it more and more, and we tried to lay all these different theories out there, we realized, even more so than I originally thought, well, there really isn't even that much interesting to it. And this theory that came across from Nathan was, the most coherent thing we could get. And it was largely, there were details around what happened at the conference the prior year that Lily disagreed on, understandably, and but those details were relatively minor. The main thing was that Paul had this grudge against John and Lily, and he himself admitted to turning the cartel onto them in his public posts. So based on the information that was out there and how it came to us, the mystery wasn't really even that significant. And the bigger message of the story is, how do you deal with, people with mental health issues in general? And I respect what Henza is saying about the community there in Puerto Vallarta and his efforts to try to actually solve this, because I think, it's easy enough to kick someone out of a closed system like a business or a small organization. But what do you do when that person doesn't leave? A lot of people in the anarchist world, they'll say like, oh, well, there's different tricks you can use. You can intimidate them. You can, I heard one person talk about like a private village somewhere where the police don't use violence. They just kind of scare the riffraff off. But ultimately, we live in a society where everyone is afraid of the government. And there is always that threat factor that you can be subject to the criminal justice system. And that is what we have. And I'm totally open to hearing new ways to deal with that. And I don't think our criminal justice system is working. And I don't think you don't have to look to Acapulco or any of these anarchist communities to see that we have a major crisis on our hands with dealing with mental health. You can look at any major city in the United States and see, just the homeless people themselves representing a tragedy, but it's way bigger than that. It's not even just the homeless. It's, a massive, massive issue that we need to figure out how to solve as a species. So I appreciate your efforts, Henza, and trying to maintain an open mind, and not just because you have something called a council doesn't mean it's a government or it's evil. And I also respect, the nonviolent communication stuff that Acapulco is trying to implement within their closed system, because I think that is one way of dealing with mental health issues. But there is no one answer. There's no panacea. I think the issue with Paul is just one story that we can look at and see as maybe a way to reflect on our own communities, our own towns, our own villages, our own cities, our own families, and think of how can we do better in dealing with this. And I think Henza, you might be right in that something could have been done differently with Paul that didn't just simply involve ostracizing him. And
yeah, one regret I actually have with Paul is like the big thing that we did was like in all of those 6 months of threats, we never once responded to him. We would read them and then we would try to ignore them. And I don't necessarily ignore conflict when it comes to me now, but when I'm confronted, like yesterday, I won't describe the situation, but I was confronted with a sort of like smaller community conflict, and I could tell that the person that was messaging me wanted me to have a conflict with them, but I kept like stopping. What do I actually want to happen from this situation? I want peace. I want things to work together. I want all people, all different things to be able to exist in the same area. And I went with that. And had I been able to like have more control over the way I interacted with the world in those days, if it were just me, like had I had the strength to leave that relationship, for example, I probably would have messaged Paul and been like, look, I don't necessarily want to be your friend, but I don't wish ill for you either. Like, I wish the best for you, but kind of like over there, I respectfully like some space. I'm not doing anything against you. But instead, we just kind of, we read his messages and then we ignored them. And he had a very paranoid mind. And I think he was kind of spinning out in that way. And I kind of wonder if maybe like, hey, we aren't trying to have this conflict with you. We wish the best for you type of thing wouldn't have been better than radio silence the way that we gave it. So now, like when I am faced with conflict, as I have been a few times since the murder with people, just smaller things, it's kind of like I wish the best for you, but way over there, like I am going to focus on myself in this situation and taking care of myself because I can't predict or control whatever this situation that's going on is. And I found better success with that. Instead of just like, like I dissociate, but I dissociate with love instead of, aggressive dissociation or just radio silence dissociation. I explain why I'm dissociating. I set up healthy boundaries. If the boundaries aren't respected, I say, hey, this boundary hasn't been respected. I'm not talking about this anymore. I wish you well, and I mean it when I say I wish people well that I cut out of my life for one reason or another. And most of the time it's just like, look, I've been through a lot. I don't know how to mitigate this situation. So I'm going to step out. Or the situation yesterday, like I was able to explain myself in an articulate way of like, hey, this is what I'm feeling in this situation. This is my goals here. And that's it. It's not meant to be as an insult to anybody. It's just, this is what I'm doing and this is how I'm doing it. And I wish you the best. And I think there's room for all of these things. Is the way that I put it in that. I won't get too much into the situation, but there's a better way to handle conflict, I've learned, than just straight up radio silence. Healthy boundaries are important.
There is a better way to handle people like Paul. And I'll tell you what it is. Call the cops.
Oh, yeah.
Hard to do in Mexico when they don't speak English. Like, how are you going to say, like, hola, está un hombre?
The anarchists don't like that answer. The anarchists don't like that. Okay.
Well,
tell that to
in
somebody
our
who's not on the run, okay?
I was kidding.
Somebody who won't get deported.
The cops didn't pay for their phone bill, by the way, so their phone wasn't actually working in the first place in Acapulco.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. His family tried to call the police station after the murder to like see what to do, and nobody answered.
No, I know. I would certainly not call the cops. I wouldn't call the cops in Acapulco, that's for sure. All right. Well, final question for all three of you is, what are you going to do now? So Todd, it's done. You finished it. It's been aired. It's amazing. It's a success. You have a new project you're thinking about, or maybe a couple new projects. What are they?
Yeah, I mean, like I said, part of me is deeply questioning whether or not I want to make another verite documentary like this one, just because of the drama and real life conflict that we get swept up in, and it's hard. I mean, obviously way harder for the people dealing with it, but just being adjacent to that and not having any kind of separation or like ability to, distance our career from personal conflict. But it's been rewarding. There's pressure for us to keep covering the story from some people. Encouragement, but my main focus right now is actually to tell a story of I wrote an essay recently titled My First Ideology, which goes into my punk rock youth and how that was the first movement that swept me up. And so I'm looking to tell the story of how that influenced our culture and some of the wild, weird stories of bands that got wrapped up in that world. But also, I'm, I got into filmmaking originally with a desire to tell narrative scripted stories. So we have a couple projects in development that are, that I think I'll always probably be telling stories of subcultures for the rest of my life, because I'm just fascinated by that aspect of humanity. But we got a bunch of things in the work, and also Kim and I are musicians too. That's how we first met before we got into making films together. So if you pay attention in episodes 4 and 6 and the credits, that's my wife's beautiful voice closing those episodes. So we're gonna be releasing those songs as singles within the next month, and we're working on a full album of songs we've been working on that kind of just got pushed aside to make this show. So
the name of the band, I guess you would call it, is Kyland, Kylland. That's Kim's last name. Go to Spotify or wherever you listen to music. I have always been a huge fan. I listened to Kyland. I told you guys, like, nonstop around the clock for months after we met. I think Kim is really talented. I think the music you guys make is fantastic. And the 2 songs that are in the show, I think it's episodes 4 and 6. Is that right? Yeah, the end, fantastic, love it. So can't wait to see what you do. I just can't wait, and I hope I can be involved in some way or another. Henza, so you're building this community of vaccine refugees in Puerto Vallarta. You're trying not to have a government over them. I'm curious, do you have a vision? Maybe you don't have a vision. Maybe it's better not to have a vision. What are you thinking about your future, if anything?
Well, we're just learning how to go forward and learning how to interact voluntarily without having to resort to coercion on one another. It's pretty simple. I've got a lot of things going on, but that's like one of many of them. And I would just like to, start building a community center that's voluntarily done and financed and everything like that. So Yeah, I just got a bunch of small little goals in my community that we're trying to meet at the moment, and we're all just feeling our way out and moving forward. Writing a script roughly about Acapulco right now with composite characters and situations that are entertaining with real life stories that actually happened within there, with several police chases and other things, other interactions that actually happen in our lives down there. My friend Ariel Friedman is the co-writer on the script, and she's absolutely fantastic. I love working with her. So we got a couple of episodes out, and maybe someday people will start looking at it and taking a serious look at what we're doing there.
Are you going to stay in Mexico?
I'm going to do both. My dad's dying right now, so I'm going to go back and spend the last few months with him, and just kind of hang out with him, and do the end of life thing, and then from there I'll figure out where I'm going to be after that. But yeah, I love Mexico too much to stay away.
Awesome. Godspeed, sir. Lily Forester, otherwise known as Miranda Webb. You're outed now.
Oh,
And I found
I
out
know,
you loved,
that's weird.
yeah, I found out that you loved your original name. I didn't know that until I saw the show.
Yeah, I had Lily was picked on a whim. I had no idea. We were on our way to Oregon, and John's like, you have to think of a fake name. And I was like, oh shit. And then we get there and they're like, what's your name? And I was like, Lily? It was the first thing that came to mind. But yeah, so my plan is first off to enjoy my life, because that's what I have control over right now. So I do circus
Good.
as much as I can.
Yeah.
I'm getting tattoos, I'm eating good food, I'm making good memories with my partner, Bernardo Azetta, or Cabra Cuerno, or whatever you want to call him. He's known as both of those things. And then the bigger plan, the long game plan, is to get my charges in Ohio dropped, because I got a long list of people. The one thing that part of the healing process these last 3 years has been one by one getting in contact with people that knew me from before, friends and family and such. And the number of people that are like, yo, I thought you died. Yo, I filed a missing persons report for you. I was like, okay, I feel real guilty now. I want to go back and I want to see those people and I want to hug them. But I'm not going to do it until I get my charges dropped. Barry Cooper maybe wants to help me with that. Otherwise, I need a lawyer to help me get the charges dropped so I can move on with my life. I want to go back to Ohio, get an actual passport, come back to Mexico legally. Or I have heard of Mexico doing things like this. Maybe Mexico will give me asylum or make me an honorary citizen. There was a guy that had spent 20 years living in Acapulco illegally that became an honorary citizen because he became involved with the community and he never left. So I am hoping for some sort of legal miracle so I can kind of leave that past behind. And then like mentioned earlier, I'm going to keep up with the circus arts. I'm going to keep performing locally because I can. And then if I do get to a point where I have freedom of travel, I'm probably going to try joining a circus. I want to write a book, ideally, get a book deal maybe. But yeah, the short-term plan is to be happy and to do circus trick. And the long-term plan is to get my legal situation fixed, be happy, and do circus tricks.
I think that's perfect. A perfect plan. Now I want to say something. So you still need a lawyer.
I do. Barry Cooper is not a lawyer. He is, I think what he technically is an expert witness. He's an ex-cop that, the way he put it to me when we were talking, we haven't had our official consultation yet, but he works harder than the defense lawyer and the judge and everybody combined to poke holes in the case. And if he can't poke holes in the case, he finds a way to get a plea bargain or something. I know for a fact there's holes in my case that can be poked. So it's one of those things where perhaps with his help combined with a lawyer, or maybe he could get the public defender to do what he's supposed to do. But I'm hoping I don't have to travel for this because the world has been kind of restrictive on that ever since COVID, and they were doing Zoom court when I was in jail. Like, I didn't appear physically in court. I went by video. And if I could go to video court, you know, from jail, why can't I do it from Mexico? Is kind of my thought process here. So I'm trying to do it because I don't trust going and just turning myself in. I don't trust them to let me out because they didn't want to let me out when I ended up there in the first place.
Okay.
So like, yeah, I'm just trying to figure out. I do have a little bit of money I raised from last Acapulco. We did an auction, and it was collected in crypto, so it's gone down a little bit, but like I still have some money to get for a retainer, for a lawyer, if I can find one that is willing to take on the case.
Right. So people who are listening or watching, if you know of any lawyer, you need one in the States and you need one in Mexico too, don't you?
Yeah, ideally I need one in Ohio that like, because like I've tried contacting these Liberty lawyers. I can't think of the names, but they're like, sorry, I can't help you. I'm a Michigan lawyer, or I can't help you. I'm a California lawyer. And it needs to be somebody with an Ohio that understands the laws that I supposedly broke. And preferably somebody in that area. You know, it's just, yeah, I'm just trying to get my life on track. Like, I'm still an agorist, but I would rather be able to like travel legally and have a fucking bank account and all of these things, you know, that I kind of lost when I decided to jump, you know, face first into anarchy.
Yeah, we all want you to have those things. So do you have an email address or someplace people could go to if they have a lead on a lawyer?
Okay, so I have my website, highlyfunctionalgrowth.com. It has a contact form. I've actually been getting just like random people reaching out through that. Okay. But yeah, if you have a lead, go fill out my contact form and I will email you back when I see it.
Awesome. Great. I'm glad we got that in. The three of you people, I love all three of you. You're all my heroes. Thank you for doing this. This has been a blast. Emotionally difficult at times, but I'm really glad we did this. And thank you for everything.
Thank you. You've been there. You have been there for me over the years. You're one of the people that were there when like the whole community was like, ah.
It seemed like the only thing to do at the time, but I was new to the scene, and I saw someone in distress, and I didn't understand why no one was coming to your aid, and it just seemed like the only thing I could do at that point. So it was great for me because I was going through a hard time in my life too, and it actually helped me get through that. You know, our relationship and talking with you every day.
Yeah, we were very close during that time.
Yeah, great. All right, everyone. Bye. Thank you.
Bye.
Take care.
Love you. Talk soon.
This is the Unregistered Podcast, and I'm Thaddeus Russell. To become a patron of the show and have access to bonus episodes, AMAs, and the unreported news analysis show, go to patreon.com/unregistered. Thanks for listening.